syndrome often happened, our trajectory altered forever. I went from being a typical playmate to being Rivki's companion, while her family went through the horrors of chemo, radiation, long hospital stays, and ultimately Shlomi's devastating passing. We alternated from being in Rivki's house in Connecticut to being in my house an hour away in New York, and never allowed anyone to separate us. While we were only 8 and 9 years old at the time and struggled to make sense of it all, we stuck closely together and created our own bubble of protection that no one could penetrate. There were also many hospital stays and periods of illness that Rivki herself went through, with her own lungs struggling to breathe and function. A few years later, Rivki's older sister, Blumi, who also had Bloom syndrome, went through a similar ordeal. She was the big sister and idol that we looked up to and pretended to be while trying on her clothes and prancing around in her shoes and generally making a nuisance of ourselves like little siblings tend to do. When Blumi passed away after her battle with cancer, our bond and bubble got smaller and tighter. It was a feeling of, if we can just stay together and protect each other, we can avoid the realities of Bloom syndrome that would be coming Rivki's way. But as time went on, the most remarkable thing happened. We slowly came into our own selves, into our own thoughts, styles, ideas, and passions, as reality does. Rivki moved to an out-of-town school, and we began to forge our own paths in certain ways. While we were still extremely close, we no longer lived in our bubble of ignoring that which was around us. Rivki had to face her Bloom syndrome head-on, as her lungs tired of its full capacity and sent her to the hospital more often than not. Rivki became the strong one. She started talking openly about her struggles and tried to make sense of what they meant for her and who she was. When I was in grade 11, Rivki's older brother, Mendel, the third of her siblings with Bloom syndrome, got married in Israel. This was an extremely exciting and momentous occasion for everyone, as Mendel had surpassed so many challenges and was an incredible person in his own right. Naturally, it was Rivki Leah, so it wasn't much of a thought that I would join Rivki in Israel for the wedding. Let me tell you, I've got many siblings, thank God, and not one of them was impressed that it was so naturally given that I got to go on the trip to Israel. Besides for being the fun and enjoyable, and of course inspiring trip that any trip to Israel contains, and certainly that added uniqueness of it being Mendel's wedding, the sheer joy and gratitude to Hashem that he had made it to this day, it was also when Rivki and I started bonding in a different way. Rivki became outspoken about what she wanted in life. She became outspoken about her desires and her dreams and hopes, whereas before we would skirt around these issues in the most obtuse and general way. This led the way for the Rivki that so many people knew and loved. Rivki was also always outspoken in her opinions, sometimes in the most hilarious way. She didn't beat around the bush, gave her thoughts and opinions straight up, often had us cringing, to be honest, but laughing when she made sure the person asking the innocent but quite obtuse or rude question, this is where the word dof would come in. I've learned that word living in this country, and she would have loved that. She would clearly but kindly put the person in their place. I could speak for hours on the goals and the life lessons Rivki taught and demonstrated, but that would be many, many hours. Instead, I'm going to skip ahead to the part that is applicable to tonight, finding the inspiration and the comfort during the difficult times to help us grow, reach forward, and remain positive, even when going through something that could be life-altering. For someone who is told that she had a life expectancy of maximum 27, would likely never get married, be able to hold a job, or live a normal life, Rivki lived to be 29. She got married and established a Chabad house at Duke University in North Carolina. Why Duke? Well, she and her mother had to move down there when her doctor informed her that she needed a double lung transplant in order to survive. So her mom and her left her family and moved down to North Carolina to be near Duke Hospital, where she worked harder than ever before to prepare her body for a double lung transplant. On one of my visits down there, I have to say I could not keep up with her gym routine. Part of preparing for a double lung transplant was making sure your body was healthy enough and capable enough of being able to accept it and then be healthy enough to carry on with it. Although many hiccups and scares came along the way, Rivki had a successful double lung transplant and went on to marry. The words ECMO, ventilator, trach, words that suddenly all of us are becoming familiar with now in COVID, are things that seem the norm. I hated that I knew what the word ECMO meant. I hated that I knew what the word life support was. I hated that I knew exactly what a vent looked like, the effects it could have, the long-lasting feel it can leave. You can just imagine how emotional and credible her wedding was. Rivki became a vocal advocate for children and adults with genetic diseases and special needs. She was an active part of Kids of Courage and Camp Simcha, two incredible organizations in America that help children with genetic diseases. She made friendships and bonds there that one could only hope to emulate. She strongly encouraged genetic testing, not because she thought her life wasn't worth living, but because she felt it would equip people with the knowledge and tools they needed. Rivki believed and showed every single day that her life was worth living. Her struggles were real and hard and sometimes seemingly insurmountable. But that didn't mean she was allowed to give up or lower her standards or let go of her dreams. Soon after Rivki was diagnosed with stomach cancer, I went on one of my frequent trips to North Carolina to visit her. We had what we had now begun calling our morbid talks. They used to make everyone around us very nervous because sometimes they would take quite dark turns. Our conversations would be real, hard, and honest. But Rivki knew that in order to reach for her dreams, sometimes it meant facing the hardest thoughts of all. Rather than discussing those talks, I'm not looking to scare any of you off the Zoom, I want to import a few of the messages that Rivki gave me and I strive to live by. Up until the moment Rivki passed away, she believed and held on to every single one of these. Give yourself the space to grieve what you hoped for, wanted, or had. In Rivki's case, I truly believe this was reflective in her wish to be a mother. In the 3 weeks, we do exactly this. In the 9 days, we do exactly this. We give ourselves the space to grieve what once was, what we wish we had, the peace and harmony we so crave and need, that the Bet HaMikdash, the Holy Temple, gave to the Jewish people and to the whole world. We mourn and we let go of what was. At the same time, Rivki had the most valuable capability to genuinely rejoice in somebody else's accomplishments and circumstances. In Yiddish, we call this to fargin. While Rivki didn't have her own children, she demanded, yes, demanded, daily pictures and videos of her nieces and nephews and of my children. Whenever I felt guilty for something normal that I was getting to do or have that I knew Rivki might not be able to ever have, she would look at me with genuine perplexity. Did this mean we didn't still discuss how hard it was for her? Oh no, those dark and twisty, hard conversations were still there. But the ability to truly and genuinely rejoice in somebody else's success was a life lesson that Rivki thrived in and I still struggle to accomplish. She got actual nachas and joy from hearing about other people's accomplishments and good fortunes, and she couldn't wait to celebrate with them, even if it meant rejoicing in something that she would never be able to attain. Having said that, just because you are accepting a loss, that doesn't mean you're accepting your status quo. Rivki's favorite saying was, if it's not okay, then it's not the end. And again, live this every day. Yes, is today really, really hard? Are my struggles real and overwhelming? Absolutely. In each of our own lives, we have struggles that are real and are hard. and it's not for us to compare to others. Is this galus, this exile, enough and dark? Absolutely. But as Shlomi, Rivka's younger brother, always used to say while having chemo, this galus, this exile stinks. Yes, this exile absolutely stinks, and we need it to end. But that doesn't mean we get stuck in wallowing. It means we climb into the dreamer's chair and we see how we're going to change the future and what are we going to do about it. Particularly now in the 9 days where we feel that tremendous loss of the wholeness and the completeness that the Bet HaMikdash brought for the Jewish people and for the whole world, we cannot allow ourselves to stay still. We cannot allow ourselves to fall into that feeling, oh, but it's never going to happen for me. No, it's time to climb into that brave dreamer's chair. It's time for us to say, well, it's not okay right now, which means it's not the end. What am I going to be doing to help bring about that change, whether on a smaller scale in terms of Corona in our community, or on a wider scale of helping to bring the ultimate redemption of Mashiach? This idea is expressed during this past Shabbos, which was known as Shabbat Chazon, as our sages teach us that every Jew was shown the vision of the third and final Bet HaMikdash. While this vision may come to us subconsciously and seems to just be a vision, it's the knowledge that the dream can become a reality. It's up to us to make a concerted effort to see those silver linings in our personal and communal lives, to help us bring about a time where we will be reunited with all of our loved ones and truly see and experience the good in everything. This upcoming Shabbos is called Shabbat Nachamu, a time of comfort. Hashem reassures us and promises us that very soon He will comfort us in the ultimate comfort, the coming of Mashiach. Thank you so much, Wendy, for this incredible opportunity. Good night.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you so, so much. That was really beautiful. Your words were inspiring. Your words were moving. And I just thank you so much for being with us. Our next speaker is another Leah, another wonderful Rebbetzin, and that is Leah Sasson. Leah is the head of Kodesh at Torah Academy Girls High School, and her husband do amazing work at the Great Park Shul. Leah, her siblings, and especially her parents, Rabbi David and Peggy Chazdan, are dear friends of Natalie, Rodney, and Lance. A more special family than the Chazdans would be difficult to find. Thank you, Leah. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Wendy. Good evening, everybody. It's such an honor to, could you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, it's such an honor to be able to commemorate Natalie's Yahrzeit together with you all. And just a few words about the timing and about Natalie as well. So as Leah had mentioned, this past Shabbos was called Shabbos Chazon, the Shabbos of Vision. Always the Shabbos before the fast of Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, is called Shabbos Chazon. And the reason is because the Haftarah of that Shabbos opens up with the words Chazon Yeshayahu, the vision of Yeshaya. And Yeshaya predicts the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, of the temple, in this Haftarah. It's probably the harshest Haftarah that's read throughout the year, where Yeshaya predicts not only the destruction of the temple, but of Jerusalem, of the entire country, and this is all following a horrible moral degeneration of the Jews altogether. But if you ask a Hasidic Jew why this Shabbos, this past Shabbos, was called Shabbos Chazon, as Leah had mentioned, a Shabbos of vision, they probably won't refer to it as the vision of the destruction, but more so the vision of hope. Because Reb Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev teaches us that it's on this very Shabbos that we are shown a prophecy, a vision, a mini prophecy, of the third and final temple to be rebuilt in Yerushalayim, in Jerusalem. So strange, two contradictory, what seems contradictory explanations of the very same Shabbos, of the very same name. On the one hand, Yeshaya speaks of the vision of destruction. On the other hand, Reb Levi Yitzchak explains to us that this is a vision of hope, of rebuilding, of the third and final temple. So what's going on over here? Are we having a vision of destruction or of hope, one where the Beis HaMikdash went up in flames, or are we now thinking to our future of rebuilding? There's an interesting story in the Talmud about a Jew who was busy farming or plowing his land on the day that the Beis HaMikdash, the temple, was destroyed. And while he was busy plowing, his cow suddenly gave a grunt, a moo. And there was an Arab nearby who was also plowing his field. And this Arab somehow had some sort of understanding of animal language. And he turned to this Jew and he said, "Son of Judah, unyoke your cow, free the stake of your plow, for the holy temple has just been destroyed." So he turns to this Jew and he says, "Stop plowing, the home of Hashem has just been destroyed." At that very moment, the cow gave another grunt, another moo. And this Arab turned to the Jew once again and he said, "Son of Judah, yoke your cow, reset the stake of your cow, for the Redeemer has now been born." In the very same story, one after another, the cow gives one moo, and the Arab speaks of the destruction of the temple, another moo, and the Arab says, "Well, actually, your Redeemer has just been born." So strange. How could it be? I mean, if we think of it, the first temple was destroyed in the year 70 CE. If Mashiach was born then where's Mashiach today? So what is going on in the story? To understand that, we'll discuss a question of a pasuk that is quoted in Tehillim. Magid devarav liYaakov, chokav amishpatav liYisrael. There's a quote that discusses Hashem's commandments and says that Hashem shares his words with Jacob, his laws and statutes with Israel. Meaning that Hashem, so to speak, is bound by Jewish law. When it says his words and his laws, these are the laws and statutes that Hashem himself keeps. He commands us to do them, but in fact, Hashem practices those very commands that he gives us to do. There's a biblical prohibition against destroying the holy temple. The Rambam teaches us that it is forbidden to smash a single stone of the altar or the temple courtyard in a destructive manner. So certainly there's no room for destroying a temple, and similarly there's no room to destroy any home of Hashem, meaning any shul or synagogue. And yet, what do we see? That Hashem himself destroyed both the first and the second temples. Now we discussed his words and his laws, these very same commandments that Hashem gives us, he is bound by. And yet how do we justify this, that Hashem would destroy two temples? Even if you would say that the Jews were maybe undeserving of the temples at the time, Hashem could have found another way to either expel the Jews or to dismantle the temple, maybe to hide it away, just like the tabernacle of Moshe was hidden away. There could have been many other methods, and yet Hashem destroyed both the first and second temples, something that seems just like we just cannot justify it. There is one permissible way to destroy a synagogue, and that is if there's going to be another shul being rebuilt in its exact location. Why? Because then, in that case, the demolition isn't actually destruction. It's actually considered renovation or construction. There's rebuilding going on in that very same site. So if that shul is being destroyed in order to be rebuilt in another location, well, then the destruction is still considered destruction, maybe for a good intention, or for sure for a good intention, for something bigger and more beautiful in another place, but you would still call the destruction demolition. But if in its very same place a new synagogue is going to be built, then we would call it construction. We would call it rebuilding, because for any renovation to take place, there are two phases. The one is to get rid of the old, and that is in order to make space for the new. So it's all one and the same process. And so it was with Hashem's destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. The demolition itself was the beginning of a renovation of the third temple to be built in its very same place. Why did Hashem find the need to destroy the first and second temples? Well, the Zohar explains that both these temples had been built by human beings, by limited, finite, mortal human beings. A human is limited, and therefore anything that he builds or creates or achieves, it's all limited and cannot be everlasting by definition. And that's why the first and second temples had to be destroyed. Because by destroying the human temple, the groundwork was being laid for a temple that defies the limits of human mortality, a temple built by Hashem himself. And because of that, it would be indestructible and everlasting. If we apply this to our own lives, we all have, as Leah had referred to, we all have those demolition moments in our lives. Sometimes the very demolition of our perceived future could contain within itself an opportunity for rebuilding, for construction. Maybe it's time to confront certain issues in our lives that we've always been too scared to confront. And if not for a certain crisis or challenge, maybe we would have deceived ourselves for much longer. Maybe it's time to dream much bigger. This could be the birth of a grand, new, big idea. Like the story of the chemist. There's a chemist who had worked super hard in order to create an adhesive, a bonding agent, a glue. And after many years of trying trial and error and trying so hard, finally it was complete. He tried it out and it did not stick. What anyone else would have called a terrible failure, effort spent in vain, yet this chemist did not look at it as a failure. Instead, he kept on asking himself, what if this is a success? What if I've discovered a solution? Now the only thing left is to find the problem. So he worked and worked, and he invested himself more, and he kept on asking himself, what could an underachieving adhesive accomplish? What could it achieve? There's got to be something. And he found it. It became a huge commercial success. The Post-it note that we all like to stick all over our laptops and computers to remind us this and that and the other. So when something comes our way that may seem like a failure, or maybe others would look at it as a failure, maybe like the chemist, we can look at it as a success, or not as a like a room for opportunity of rebuilding. All rebuilding is painful. To watch a house going down is never fun, and especially if it's one's own. Then the headaches, the toil, the rubble takes a lot of pain even. But it's crucial if we want something new, something better, something bigger. And the same is true with every breakdown in life. When one door closes, another door opens. And all we need is the courage to find that open door and to enter it. And with this, we can understand what happened with the double mooing of the cow. The first moo, the Arab says, was the destruction of the temple. The second moo referred to the birth of our Redeemer, of Mashiach. But these were not two detached occurrences, the burning of the temple on the one hand and the birth of Mashiach on the other hand. But in fact, these two events were essentially one and the same. The very destruction of the temple was the birth of Mashiach. Demolition of the Beis HaMikdash could be seen in two ways. On the one hand, we could think of the destruction as the Beis HaMikdash going up in flames, the house of Hashem disappearing. But in that very same painful and horrific destruction, the third temple was starting to be built. So it's during these days that are leading up to Tisha B'Av that we all sense profound pain and grief. And certainly thinking about, I can't believe that we're commemorating this yahrzeit of Natalie, and that just brings so much pain and grief to the fore. But yet at the same time, there's this unwavering hope and faith in future redemption. In fact, the interpretation of Reb Levi Yitzchak of Bardichev, that the vision of this past Shabbos was a vision of hope for the future, did not contradict Yeshaya's vision of destruction, because within that vision of destruction of Yeshaya lay the hope and vision of the future, of the rebuilding of the third temple to happen speedily now. And just a few words about Natalie. I've been thinking so much about her, also like scrolling through my phone and little bits of communication here and there. And Wendy, how you had mentioned how she cared so much about people around her. And I just saw again and again how she messaged me for every simcha that took place in the family, and not just my own, whether it was my brothers or anything that was happening, she would always say Mazel Tov, and just her thoughtfulness to do that each time, when I'm sure she could have been lying in hospital, as sick as anything, and yet she was thinking of others, as you say, Wendy, for those around her and the nurses of that, but far beyond that as well. I always saw Natalie as such a heroine. She raised 2 children despite challenges, what people might have called destruction or demolition. She was building, she was investing in her children, making sure that they had the academic opportunity, the spiritual opportunity that she so wished for, against all odds. And with that, she gave of herself to the school, to the committees at school, parent groups, and at Shul as well. When the Shul, Great Park Shul, was going through a difficult time, she did what she came and saw, like, what could she give? How could she help? And so many memories of Natalie dropping her 2 boys, Lance and Ronnie, at our house at Shabbos for Shabboses, and how we would look forward to the fun and activity, and then the Shabbos meals together with her and with Auntie Bella. Just so many wonderful memories that we'll treasure forever. Natalie's greatest joy was to see her children flourish when they started laning, davening, succeeding in university, becoming leaders in their own fields. That was her greatest nachas, and I have no doubt is her greatest nachas, of her children and grandchildren. And I've always felt a strong connection with Natalie, and I miss her, and I daven for the day that Mashiach will come speedily now so we could be reunited. Thanks, Wendy.
Wow, thank you so much, Leah. That was beautiful. And for those inspirational words and those personal words, thank you so much. Wow, thank you so much, everybody, for being with us this evening. We're so blessed to have you all. May we merit to just see the Beis HaMikdash rebuilt with the coming of Mashiach now. And may this Tisha B'Av be a Yom Tov instead of a fast day. Have a good evening, everyone, and I hope to see you all in person very, very soon.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.